Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Welcome to the first video, besides the introduction of course, in my Western core literature series. We're starting with Homer's Iliad, even though, as I said in my intro, Gilgamesh is technically, the beginnings of Western epic literature. This wasn't discovered until the 19th century. So even though it's belated and it chronologically came first, it is Homer's Iliad that so much of Western literature points back to. And so it's very important to lay that foundation for all of your reading. The more you can begin to absorb and memorize the core of Western literature, I guarantee you the more you're going to get out of even much later literature. If you read, for example, the poems of Rimbaud or Baudelaire, you're going to be indebted to Homer and Ovid and so on for a lot of what's going on in there. I recently read the Lattimore translation of Iliad and Odyssey. This is a great translation. Previously, the very first time I read through the Iliad, I used the Robert Fagles translation, and this is actually a beautifully produced book. It has a huge introduction. It has genealogies in the back, lots of endnotes. The type is beautiful, really big, bold text. And then the second time I read it in the Fitzgerald, because even though I hate these decorative books, they always stink. They always smell like some kind of old Barbasol shaving cream or something, or like Brute cologne that your grandfather wears. But anyway, it was really cheap and it gave me a Fitzgerald translation, and then Lattimore. So going back, using the Loeb library, which is probably our greatest resource for these classical texts. They've got this great side-by-side with the original Greek, and then these have a modern translation by A.T. Murray. This is a great resource for when I read certain things in one of the English translators and I notice differences. It's always illuminating to go back to the original text and then use a Homeric dialect lexicon. This is my favorite one. This is from University of Oklahoma Press. It's Richard John Cunliffe, and it allows you to go and look up the Greek word and get a sense of what may have been its pronunciation in Homer's Greek, and then what it means in context. So this is much better than just grabbing any old classical Greek lexicon, because Homer's was a very different Greek. It was very much its own. So let's talk about the opening line. The opening line is very well known to us, and it sets the tone for this huge epic of war in the final days of the Trojan War. In the Greek, I'll do the best I can. It says, Menen Ada Teia Peliadio Achilleos. And we don't really know how it was pronounced, so I can't really be wrong, can I? Anyway, A.T. Murray translates that as the wrath-sing goddess of Peleus' son, Achilles. And Achilles is definitely, I'd say, how most of us pronounce that great character, whose wrath is actually much delayed in this text. But in any case, if we listen to that again in the Greek, we hear Achilleos or Achilleos. So it's a little different than Achilles. And that's what I like about Lattimore. He maintains that original Greek of Achilleus. And he says, sing, goddess, the anger of Peleus' son, Achilleus. So that's really nice to maintain that feel. Whereas, again, in just like A.T. Murray, we get rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son, Achilles. And notice too, in Fagles we have rage. In A.T. Murray, we have wrath. In Lattimore, we have anger. All right, so anyway, we focused on the opening line, and we've seen anger and rage and wrath. But this is where, again, if we use our Homeric lexicon, we can go in here and we can find that word. And we find it here and we see, okay, meanus, even though meanin is the original word that's used. And we see that it says wrath or ire. So wrath would definitely be the operative word here. Okay, but even though the Iliad starts off with basically this war description, saying wrath or anger or rage, and we know that Achilles is going to be the hero and he's going to exact revenge on one of his own for basically taking his war booty away from him. And you know, that is a double entendre that was intended. Briseis was taken from him, and now Achilles is going to go pout for something like 20 chapters. And the interesting thing, and this says a lot about the ancient Greek mindset, as sad as it may be in light of feminism. But, you know, he's pouting about Briseis being taken, and he decides he's just going to let tons of his comrades be slaughtered over and over and not care at all. But it isn't until Patroclus is taken down, his good friend, that he jumps into action. And that really is how it was in ancient Greece. You know, women served a very singular purpose, and in fact, all the way into the 1st century AD, in Greco-Roman culture, it was very much so that your wife, you know, provided kids and so on, like, and took care of the house and whatever. But there wasn't really much of a romantic relationship. For that, for intimacy, it would be with other guys. Friendship was and comradeship was much preferred over an intimate relationship with a woman. So that's very much apparent here. This book is sort of a blueprint for all of country music that would come much later. Here we've got a guy who loses his woman, stops working so he can go and sulk, and then his best friend dies. So the only thing we're missing is you know, your truck breaking down and your dog dying. You know, another thing that Iliad does that Hesiod's Theogony does not is that it illuminates the Greek pantheon or the Greek mythological history with this just this onslaught of action narrative. And in fact, Clifton Fadiman talks about how when we go from the Iliad to the Odyssey, it's almost like we get to take this deep breath. The Iliad is just overwhelming violence and intensity. And then you turn to the Odyssey and you're on the sea and you're with Odysseus as he's trying to get back to Ithaca, and then Telemachus who's out trying to find him, and Penelope cloistered up in her palace with all of these suitors banging at the door, so to speak. But it slows way down, and even though there are plenty of intense moments and conflicts in the Odyssey, there's this definite contrast between the two. But this one goes ahead and gives us a lot of the interpersonal dynamics, the different households, and the pantheon of ancient Greek mythology. If we look at some different things that have been written about the Iliad, Clifton Fadiman placed the Iliad at the start of his lifetime reading plan, and you know, of it and the Odyssey, he says they are the first as well as the greatest epics of our civilization. Achilles is the first hero in Western literature, and ever since, when we talk of heroic qualities, Achilles is somewhere in the back of our minds. The essential quality of the Iliad is nobility, and all imaginative artists, but only if they are great enough, seem contemporaries of Homer. Richard Jenkins, in his book Classical Literature, he says the Iliad is a story without villains. Homer has shaped a distinctive picture of the divine. And Robert B. Downs, in his books that have changed the world, or books that changed the world. He declared that Homer's epic creations established for all time the greatness of Greek literature. Harold Bloom, in his introduction to his compendium of critical essays on the Iliad, he says that the Iliad, except for the Yahwist, Dante, and Shakespeare, is the most extraordinary writing yet to come out of the West. Homer and the subsequent Greek tragedians like Aeschylus and Euripides, they were so much a part of the culture that even into first century Roman times, when Barnabas and Paul enter a public space, in Acts 14:11 through 13, we see, "And when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian, 'The gods have come down to us in the likeness of men.' Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker." So here they go and they run and they get a priest of Zeus, and they brought oxen and garlands to the gates and wanted to offer sacrifices with the crowds. So it just shows that this Homer started this culture that permeated 900 some years later, basically a millennia later, to the point where these personages of the early Christian church were thought to be gods come down, just as we read about in the Iliad. One of the major features of the text is that of honor and nobility and what makes a man's life glorious. In the Iliad, the answer to what makes a man glorious appears to be found through the fire of warfare. In other words, the greatest warrior is the most noble person. Another interesting feature coming out of warfare is that Achilles on the Achaean side and Hector on the Trojan side represent the ideals of what can be thought of as ancient Greek eugenics. Another thing that has always struck me about Homer, for all of his vivid, graphic detail of brutality and violence, he is extremely reticent when it comes to sex. The most it gives us is that it may say like Paris and Helen, or Zeus and Hera on the mountaintop ensconced in a cloud, mind you, which is giving them privacy. The most that it says is that they were taken to lovemaking or something like that. And I just think that's very interesting, as this is way, pre Judeo-Christian morality. So this is way before them. So there weren't those ultra conservative models for sexual material, yet very reticent. It's almost like Homer already saw this as almost a sacred divine act, even though that flies in the face of a lot of what we know of Greco-Roman sexual activity. Here's an example of the vividness of violence in Homer. This is from book 14, lines 493 through 499. "This man, Peneleos, caught underneath the brow at the bases of the eye and pushed the eyeball out, and the spear went clean through the eye socket and tendon of the neck, so that he went down backward, reaching out both hands. But Peneleos, drawing his sharp sword, hewed at the neck in the middle, and so dashed downward the head, with helm upon it, while still on the point of the big spear the eyeball stuck." And we see this again actually in the Odyssey. There are these really vivid descriptions of eyeball or ocular gore, which is really interesting in light of the fact that Homer is famously blind. I'm a reader who likes to seek out things that touch the sublime, as defined in an old book by Longinus called On the Sublime. And certainly in book 9, we see sublime moments. Book 9 is is a close formal relative of the book of Job, in that three friends of Achilles take turns trying to counsel and sway him in his lowest point in life. And in the midst of these speeches from his friends, Achilles brings out this sublime rejoinder. He says, I carry two sorts of destiny toward the day of my death. Either if I stay here and fight beside the city of the Trojans, my return home is gone, but my glory shall be everlasting. But if I return home to the beloved land of my fathers, the excellence of my glory is gone, but there will be a long life left for me, and my end in death will not come to me quickly. Wow, the threat of death looms over Achilles because he is doomed to a short life. In fact, because he's Achilles, one of the things about him is that he's very quick, he's very speedy, he's like a modern day Flash. But because of that, he speeds through life and thus has a short life, such as the genius of ancient Greek thought. However, what he's getting at is this dilemma that we can all relate to. The Iliad then is a long consideration of this sublime would you rather question. Would you rather secure glory in this life but die young, or let that glory pass you by and stay alive longer and be with your family and friends in your homeland? So that's it. Those are my remarks about the Iliad, this very, very important, crucial pillar in the foundation of Western literature. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and you will tune back in for the next book in this series, which will be Homer's Odyssey.